Hey, welcome back to the Sound Horizons podcast brought to you by TuneTrack. My name is Rick. I am the host with the least, which is how I got the job, actually. They said, how completely and thoroughly insecure are you about everything in your life? Insecure enough that you'll let us put you on camera and feel important for a few minutes a day. And I could not wait. That's how insecure I am. But that's a story for another podcast. Listen, as you know, we just do this thing where we bring you the coolest people in the music industry, period. Again, the coolest people. Today's guest, of course, no exception. And what's cool about today's guest, out of the many things that are cool, is to use a term from modern pop culture. And by modern, I mean early 2000s Marvel movies that most of you probably didn't see. He's the daywalker. He has been in our industry. He has seen all the things and done all the things. He has a desirable and enviable career that has left him with a plethora of superpowers unique to him and his position in our industry. So, who is this mystical, magical superhero worthy of a Jack Kirby comic cover? Say that 8 times quick. Your friend, your new friend, you're just meeting him for the first time, but you're going to love him. Your new friend and mine, Mr. Gregory Butler. Mr. Butler, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Rick. The first thing I just want to say is that there are few people whom, like, when you walk into the room and you see them, they just bring happiness, and that's who you are.
Oh, man.
You've always been that, and it doesn't matter whether I get an email from you or if I see you somewhere, which obviously happens more rarely these days, but
Yeah.
so I just appreciate getting the chance to talk to you and just hang out.
Well, man, I'm not ready for this kind of love. My psychologist says I don't take compliments well, so we have to stop. But thank you. That's incredible.
My psychologist is my wife. So,
Wah, wah.
she's just a doctor in psychology.
Dun, dun, dun. How does that work with the client-patient confidentiality? Did I just go down a rabbit hole? Dun, 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 dun.
Yeah, it's,
That's crazy.
She handles it how she needs to.
Well, listen, so I wanted to try something different in this. We're always talking to the coolest people about the coolest stuff. But as I alluded to, as I was sharing with our new friends that are going to be listening to this conversation,
Sure.
You're in a unique position, at least from my perspective. So, Duck, here comes some love. You've done the songwriting for artists and yourself, obviously, but for a lot of great artists, mixing, remixing, you've done that whole thing. You've done production. You've done the composition thing. You've been a composer. You've had music in television shows and films. So you've done the two things that most aspiring musicians wish they can get a little grasp or grip on at some point in time in their life. But you also have this other component of your career where you've worked on my side of the industry. You've worked for some of the biggest companies in their infantile formats, of Steinberg, for instance, Native Instruments. Plus, you actually were the boss of a company at the helm of this whole home recording thing that was making custom PCs, PC Audio Labs, for people all over the world. So you have this crazy perspective. And what I want to do is I want to take this crazy perspective and laser focus it in on the one thing that at the time of the filming of this podcast, everybody is either confused about, complaining about, confused and complaining about, or scared of, and that's artificial intelligence and its current state in the industry right now. So we're doing this is in 2024, whatever month, doesn't matter, because it seems like AI was nowhere when the year started, and within the 10 months it's taken for us to have this conversation, it's the only thing anyone's talking about.
Right.
And I feel your perspective is unique because as you and I were conversing and going back and forth, you bring up a great point. You've been in the industry to see these sort of births and deaths of all of these things, right? So as these transitions happen, and so now AI is this new tsunami of why even bother with music? It's going to all just be computers. No one cares. We should just quit. You've never been that guy. You talk about me being a light at the end of the tunnel. You're always a guy who sees the reality, and what I love about you is the possibility. Whether or not we take or exercise that possibility, unfortunately, is on us, but you at least see it. So I want to jump off and just start with you have again a unique perspective. The AI conversation, very much like with myself, it's not like we didn't see this coming. We've been seeing it in other forms and other shapes
Mhm.
before it was kind of consumerized. But
Right.
now that it's here and people are talking about it, what are your initial impressions?
Okay. Lot to take in out of that. What I would um first say, it's funny, when you mentioned about, the computer writing the music, I was the guy in the 80s who would walk into a studio with a computer and get laughed at, right? And by the time I stopped making music for a living, at least, the entire process was inside the computer, right? So that was in a span of 25 years, you know? Um, I think that, and obviously anyone who's listening to this has most likely had been part of that experience in some way or another. Um, there's, I, I guess I'll start by saying, in terms of, my perspective, is that this whole thing has been accidental for me too, right? I
Mm.
mean, I just wanted to make music. It's all I wanted to do. And, I always said, like, if I had a pair of spoons, I would have been a spoon player. Like, it just happened to be that I had friends who had computers and I was lazy.
Mm.
I just didn't have the discipline to learn guitar. I was a singer, which is even worse. So it's like there was a computer, there was this and that. And, uh, when I look at where we are now, you know, first off, I'll keep saying first, but I think first off, from a business perspective, it's understanding that the music industry has only existed in the way that we even vaguely think of it for about 100 years, you know? So when we sit around as maybe when we were younger, it was all about getting a record deal, and then maybe 10, 15, 20 years ago, suddenly everybody wanted to do music for TV or picture or whatever it is, because everyone was chasing the idea of making a living out of what they loved. Um, most of humanity has never had that opportunity,
Mm.
right? So I think we have to be kind of grateful for the fact there's a lot of focused on what's being lost instead of going, hey, maybe this was it. And I know that's a weird thing to say, but maybe this was it. Maybe this was the big moment, uh, and that's how it's going to happen. And I say that in kind of an existential way to set the bar of, like, everything that we can talk about with AI. We don't know where it's going to go. We don't know where it's going to go in every direction. So for us as people who write or compose, perform, or make the instruments that people are using, whatever, um, I think we just have to enjoy whatever it is first, and then the economics of it exist outside, if that makes sense, right? I'm just
Sure. Yeah.
okay.
I think to your point, one of the first things people hone in on is the economic component. It's weird with
Mhm.
any new technology. And again, great observation. Like the reality of the fact that someone could earn not only a living, but an above average or above ordinary living by
Mhm.
making music is a uniquely, we always talk about first world problems. It's like, yeah,
Right.
for this period of time, we're so used to it that now we're kind of boo-hooing like it's being taken away from us to some extent. But is it? And I guess that as you start to touch on economics, everyone's first fear is, well, there's never going to be, now they're just going to, and labels, and it's always going to be, the big bad man behind the door that's going to exploit the
Right.
technology to take everyone's money away.
Well, you and I right now could set up a company today using AI that would make money
Mhm.
and around music. So there is, in the same way that the internet, you know, back to the, roll back just a little bit and see when you started to have the ability to record at home, and then you started to have the ability to promote your band, and you started to have all of this, and the notion was that, oh my gosh, like, everyone's going to be able to go out and do this without the label. And in fact, it almost created the opposite thing. The middle class got completely stripped out of the music industry,
Mhm.
right? You can make pennies or you can make millions, but everybody else has just been fighting for the scraps. I used to joke that I wanted to be an A-list producer, but the way it happened was the A-list came down to me,
Ooh.
right? Because like everything just started to just pull all the money out of it. So the economics of this AI part, there is, if we want to say any upside, is that if you really want to, you could go out and use AI to make money today without needing a major label or doing any of that. But the problem is that is going to just strip out another layer of the general economics of this because, and I'll give this example flat out. I sat with some friends. One of them uh, has been at the forefront of generative AI and is also a musician, literally from my first band. The reason I'm called Gregory is because my first band was with a friend of mine, Greg Wygonic. We were both called Greg. And because I was an Ori, I switched to Gregory so that we could. So,
Nice.
to be
You
fair, I
you pulled
always
the
knew.
short straw.
When everybody said Greg, it was obvious. If it sounded like a teddy bear, they were talking to him. If it was for an asshole, it was me, right? So I
Nice.
knew. But anyway, so we've been working on stuff, and I talked to a few other friends, and I saw a path. I was like, look, we could go make a bunch of money, right? We could do it in this way. It's not really going to be harmful. It's going to give money to XYZ partners. But the thing that came up was I just suddenly go, and a year later, that thing that we've built will already be like complete nonsense because it's the flood of content that causes the problem.
Hmm.
Um, and so the more songs you have, and that's the same as for streaming or anything else, that if you're, uh, if the pie that gets shared out stays the same, but you put more ingredients into the pie, it's like there's not more, um, maybe I'm kind of putting that forward a little bit awkwardly, but basically there's only so much money.
Of
And if
course.
you double the amount of, contents in there, the pie still costs the same. Therefore, the amount that gets shared out of it is the same, and you don't make more money. You make less money.
So I think the for me the larger questions that loom,
Mhm,
simply because I look at the money component of music has always been industry related, and the purpose
mhm,
of industry is to corral all of those energies and efforts, just like the automotive industry or the
mhm.
tech industry. So it's no surprise to me ever that every industry tries to continue to innovate so that the people at the top of the industry can make as much money as they can without as many people in the middle or the bottom of the industry. That's just the way industry works in general.
Right.
So if you strip all that stuff away, I think the challenge I have with AI is everyone is so fixated, at least now, and this is just a very short term issue.
Mhm,
They're so focused on what we're going to lose from AI. I haven't
mhm.
heard anyone talk about maybe some of the positive things that might actually happen musically or artistically as a result of the AI. And
Okay.
that in and of itself, sub question, is marred in the entire um, diatribe about copyright, trademark, ownership, stealing,
Well,
borrowing, all of those things.
so there's an existential. Well, for starters, there's always an existential problem, right? So I think that's where we trick ourselves is thinking that things are going to stay a certain way. If you look back at it, it took about 50 years for the way radio handles royalties to get into the place that it is now,
Mm,
right? So 50 years of time of battling, of fighting, and to get into that thing. So these things are always occurring. It's always changing. The system itself is incredibly archaic and designed for um, all these dark spots where the money can get hidden and taken a different direction. So you kind of have to accept that these battles that are going on over copyright and all this, those are the battles that are always going on. And if anything, we should feel really fortunate that people are fighting it so quickly because there really isn't time when it comes to AI. And maybe in this, we'll talk a little about what AI even means. But if you look at all the lawsuits and upcoming lawsuits, and so I'm going to start with the copyright side. they are, I believe that we should be looking at it like it's sampling.
Okay.
The reason is that a lot of words get used, and I think we fight over words because machine learning. So then the idea is like, well, the machine is just learning the music like you or I would learn the music, but that's not what's actually happening.
No.
Or at least there's a level of learning, but it's really an analysis based on that recording, right? And taking that recording and reconfiguring it. If I take a sample from someone else's song and I chop it up and put effects on it, I've still used a sample and I am legally obligated for all of the elements that I have used in that, right? Be it publishing, writing, mechanicals, all that stuff. That's a lot more akin to what is happening here. And I think if we could just get to a point where we say, hey, it's like sampling, then they would be able to work out the math on it. Um, there'll always be someone else breaking the rules, whatever. But, you know, I think as creators, what we should be more focused on, and again, not more focused on as if that isn't really important, but is the idea that the human connection that comes out of performance and out of that experience is what we're going to have to sell.
Hmm.
I don't think that I think that if I hear a piece of music and AI created it and I liked it, I can't suddenly dislike it because it wasn't created by a human. But, last year went and saw Love and Rockets play, and I saw three human beings stand on stage and just transport me through incredible performance and human in a crowd, you
Sure.
know, and that to me becomes part of the focus of how we maintain a
Well, and
reality.
I couldn't agree with you more about the sampling analogy because there is the misconception when you say supervised or unsupervised machine learning that
Mhm.
somehow AI, it would be one thing to that avail if AI was sat in front of an Esteban video and watched him play guitar, and then it learned how to play guitar, and as a
Mhm.
result of what it learned, it could write songs without any other inspiration. But right now, as you mentioned, the actual term artificial intelligence or Apple intelligence, it really, in layman's terms, is just faster Google. It's quicker at getting all the information that already exists than you are, and then
Right.
assimilating that into a data set that allows it to find similarities or things that are common and whatever the algorithm's programmed to do, whether it's figure out all the 1, 6, 5, 4, so whatever that is, and then exploit the speed of being able to take all of those things. So I do find it interesting when you talk about the sampling phenomenon because the one thing that I think a lot of people are starting to find now is you had mentioned earlier about the massive content dumps at any point in time in whether it's too many if you go back, what's funny, you talk about this not being a new problem. If you go back to the 50s or you
Mhm.
go to any garage sale, you'll
Mhm.
never find the same vinyl records at the same garage sale. It's like anybody who could
That's right.
even take a picture got their own vinyl record made in the fifth. It's like I have never heard of half, and it's amazing. So to my point, AI will eventually start eating its own tail in its current state. If it's learning from what's out there, if the majority of the things that are out there become AI generated, it's then learning from itself, and ultimately, you kind of had this feedback loop that stalls its growth and still, like you said, gives the human connection, the human proponent of this, time to get ahead of the curve.
You actually just described, when you talk about eating itself, everything about music,
Mm,
right?
yeah,
Because music is always eating itself.
it's true.
And I I look at musical movements through that lens of saying, well, for instance, I'm a big hip hop guy. I mean, I love all genres, but I made hip hop for a living. When I went and did that in the 90s, the first thing I did was I was like, okay, I might make beats and things that people like, but I'm still an outsider. So I went and listened to everything I could get my hands on from the 50s, 60s, and 70s, right? That had to do with R&B, soul, funk, P-funk, just went nuts, right? But out of that, what I saw was like, that made it so that I was influenced by the same things that my contemporaries were influenced by, you know? But if you flash forward to today, what is a writer or producer or anyone influenced by? If you're 30 years old, if you didn't make the effort to go learn, well, then you're influenced by, what is it? You're going to be influenced by Soldier Boy and 50 Cent and stuff like that. I mean, not because what did your parents listen to or what is that? So all of the things that are happening in AI are exactly what happens with humans, with one exception. And this is where I think it's important to distinguish between AI and AGI, right? Humans are akin to AGI, artificial general intelligence, because I'm not only influenced by listening to a Stevie Wonder or Kim Weston or whatever, I'm influenced by the fact that I just knocked my leg into the table and hurt myself.
Mm,
And I'm influenced by the fact that I read a book by someone, or that, like, taking all of these experiences where these generative AI musical things are not basing it on anything except that sample that's been put in there,
mm,
right? So
yeah.
there's no other experience level. It is just generating out of, the purest mathematical approach to this. So therefore, we're back at the, whatever the saying is, it at 100 monkeys in a room typing. It's like that's what AI is.
Yeah,
It's
and it's crazy because in true tech innovation form, the two first industries to be affected are the film industry and the music industry
right.
because they're cultural byproducts of everyday life forever. And I can only speak intelligently about America. So, Americans, every American has some connection to what they watch or consume, whether it's a movie or YouTube content or anything, or and what they listen to either by itself or in conjunction with that. Do you find a fear in your and it just being vulnerable moment?
Mm.
Do you find a fear that might be valid in the AI music separating us further from the culture of real music or separating us further from the emotional experience that music can bring when it's crafted and experienced by human beings in a particular way?
Well, first you mentioned vulnerability. I'm a big Brené Brown fan, so I love my vulnerability.
Nice.
Um, the At the core of this, everything always has to go back to, does it even matter, right?
Okay. Fair.
Does it matter? If I listen to something and I like it, will I be unhappy that
Mm.
it is? So let's talk about, you mentioned, my kind of getting to experience the death or transformation of a few industries. What so I did, I was very fortunate. A friend of mine was working on the show Punked prior to it existing, and he's like, "Send over some music." And I sent over some music, and I was like, I had no idea what I was doing. I just sent over unfinished songs. And then they used them all, and I got the check back and was like, "Oh my god, people will pay me to not finish songs. This is incredible."
That's the
You
best
know?
way I've ever heard of
Right,
describing
right.
it. That's
Yeah,
fantastic.
it's like I didn't have to spend
Yeah.
weeks crafting this thing. I got a minute of an idea and somebody said, "That's good enough," right?
Perfect.
And that was the start of it. And then, over the course of about 15 years that I did music for TV, I saw people, companies, which are made up of people, care less and less about what they were getting, right? It just had to solve a problem.
Mm.
And so I think when it comes to the generative AI part and back to, the thing about bands or anything else, is that it boils down to who writes the check. If whoever writes the check cares, then the thing makes money, you know? So generative AI, when I saw, and by the way, I mean, you had Joey Newman on. Joey Newman's one of my
Yeah.
old composing partners, right? And a
Yep.
dear friend. Like, so we were partners when I said I'm stopping,
Mm.
and my whole thing was like, I see where this is going. Like, people don't care enough about it. I knew that there are so many great pieces of software out there. TuneTrack being one of them. I was big TuneTrack user in my career. Um, when you see all of these things coming together, you're like, hey, the people who write the checks don't care anymore. And the technology is going to a point where it's going to be able to look at what's needed, and somebody is going to be able to press a button and make what's needed, you know? And that's we're not even entirely there, but we're so close that I guess if that's answering the question, I mean, like I'm
Sure. Well, it's relative, right? Like you said, all this, none of this exists in a vacuum. It didn't just come out of nowhere. I mean,
right,
this is an eventuality. Is like this was going to happen 10 years
right.
ago. What?
Well, that's it was going to happen from the moment that it started.
Right.
And I think that, but that's why I say, like, does it matter? Doesn't matter. It really boils down to the humans. It's our responsibility as humans. Responsibility may be the wrong word, but if you're making music today, you should be making it with the idea that if a machine can do it better than me, that's the problem. I have to be a better human at
Mm.
making music, you know, of relating emotionally, of that.
Well, if we take 5 seconds and take one step back to the copyright issue, do you
Sure.
think that there's a component of this that wasn't, well, not even think? My guess here, I'll put on the tinfoil hat
Uh-huh.
and go down the conspiracy theory road. I think at some particular point in time, someone anticipated the whirlwind of copyright concern that was going to come as a result of this quick learning, quick searching AI that could generate things that sound almost exactly like other things.
Mhm.
And I think they were counting on the fact that the scope of that realm that would need to be enforced from a copyright. I mean, you're talking about every art. When you listen to how some of these companies have trained their models, they're like, oh, well, we just turned it loose on Spotify. It's like that's a platform with 10,000 new additions to it minimum a day.
Right.
How could you even mitigate copyright or licensing claims on a pool that broad, or prove it in a court, or unfortunately here in the States, even get it to a court in any timely manner to make
Mm.
a difference whatsoever? And as a result of that sort of realization, do you think we're in a place where maybe some people are taking advantage of that? Again, that's an inevitability. That's not something that's tenable for us in our legal system right now to enforce.
So, two things about that. One, music copyright has been under threat for a bit now. Obviously, there's always been lawsuits about this, that, the other, but if you look back at especially the 60s and 70s, it was, and I mean, again, we can go further back, but I just wanna say from a pop culture perspective, the 60s and 70s, you could go and have the exact same riff that was in somebody else's song and not get sued.
Yeah.
You had James Brown effectively completely copy Fame by David Bowie and release it as a single. You had, uh, uh, Neil Young, it was Buffalo Springfield, right? Did a song that is the riff,
Yeah.
right? All these things used to just happen. It was, and let's not even get into Led Zeppelin, right? So you had all these things used to happen. Flash forward to, and maybe the most famous case to kick this off was the Marvin Gaye one.
Right.
Um, so I guess I just want to say that, like, suddenly with Marvin Gaye, it was vibe. That's when it got scary, right? When suddenly feeling like or reminding you of another song was enough, which is really out there. We all know within, and I'll say generally within pop context, we're working with 12 notes, right? And and not only within that, you could still narrow it down and say how many hits were written in this particular key or yada yada. Um, so I think there's been a thread on that side which is still working its way out. On the conspiratorial side, I go back to the idea of, like, it's just business logic,
Sure.
right? You're sitting there going, I need to do this. I better do it as fast as I can because they're going to come after me. I'm going to call out I feel like I'm saying a lot of things that could be really negative or scary. I think that the flip side of that is, um, you know, someone like Selena Ong, who's the head of editorial, which really means programming at Spotify. You've got Alex Luke, who used to have the same job at Apple and at Amazon, and geez, I mean, Brian McNellis at Lakeshore, who's been fighting for the rights of artists, and I can kind of go on and on. But those are three people. Victoria Camera, who does digital at Warner Brothers, and there's so many other people. They love music. They care about music, and they care about musicians. These are still people who are in charge of this game. These are still people who are the ones putting out the records, making the playlists, signing the artists, and all that. So it's not like because copyright is under threat or because AI can generate this or that, that like somehow everything is upside down and non-recoverable. There are lots of humans who love music in the music industry. I think there's more threat from outside the music industry,
Sure. Well, and
right?
to that avail, so while we're talking about copyright, currently at the time of this recording, there's a current federal indictment case going on with a gentleman
hmm
on the East Coast who, over the course of a few years, created a number. And this is before it got really easy. So he was actually way ahead of the curve because he was
hmm
creating hundreds and hundreds of AI songs,
hmm
uploading them to Spotify
hmm
under, artists. And it's funny when they describe the case, they say fictitious artist names, which is the
hmm
stupidest phrase I've ever heard in my life
Right,
because
because they're all fictitious.
yeah, I don't, it's a dumb, but when we're angry with someone, all the semantics go out the window.
Uh-huh.
So, and he made tens of millions of dollars in royalty
hmm
payments through
hmm
Spotify
hmm
using bots and all these other things. And they're saying, well, that's fraud. And this is where I hear the record skip because I kind of don't understand what this gentleman did wrong other than make a bunch of money before a bunch of other people did. If what we're talking about is copyright anonymity and all these other things, and
Right.
Spotify is a digital platform, he hasn't broken any laws by making AI music. He hasn't broken any laws or terms of service by uploading them to Spotify that I'm aware of yet. And as far as botting goes, Spotify can say, well, that's not fair and we don't like it and we don't want to encourage it. But unfortunately, that wasn't always a policy at Spotify. Even just a few years back, they didn't seem to mind. So I'm trying to figure out why this gentleman is in the court's eye because we don't seem to take that. And that escalated so quickly. That's the other thing is he went
Right.
from no one knew. When real artists have these types of issues or problems with copyright, it takes years for the court to
Yeah.
even think about it.
Yeah.
What's your take on that?
Well, I definitely can't speak for Spotify. Um, what we do know is that so far the courts have looked at artificial intelligence as something that you can't copyright. And I think that would likely be the key in this case. It would be you've gotten royalties over something that should be public domain. If you as a human didn't go in and turn this into something, right? I think that's the first part of it. Then the second part would go to if it's generative, which it is, how was it generating it? What was it generating against? So that would be the second part is like if you were ingesting a bunch of I mean depending on what kinds of genres he is hitting, but the easiest of course is electronic music in terms of the realism, right, that comes
Sure.
out of it, right? So
Yeah.
let's say you were ingesting a bunch of these electronic bands and then you spit out this other thing, um, that it, that becomes the copyright issue on the other side. So my guess is, I haven't even looked at this one. I've been following all of the more on the generative side, that portion of it than the
Sure.
artist side, right? But that to me would probably where it falls. Now, if you're asking me as a human, do I think that that's an issue? Well, the generative one, yeah, I think that that's the sampling issue. On the other side, I think it gets trickier, right? Because if if I was getting yelled at, in 1990 or 2000 or whatever for using a computer to make music, okay, so I've thought about this actually in the context of Tune Track, right? And I don't know how much I'm allowed to plug, but let's talk about it. So when as both on like the artist writing side and the composing side, the first place was, okay, these are great samples, so that's what I'm going to use, right? I'm going to go down that road. Then the next thing is like, oh, this company now has MIDI files in it that are replicating drum patterns that at worst case are a starting point and at best solve all of my problems, of getting something out there quickly. The line is me hitting a button and it just generates, and I say rock 120 similar to this band, blah blah, and it just generates everything. It's like, well, if the people who at TuneTrack who are making this, they have been paid money to create this, to do this as a tool, that's totally cool.
Mhm.
And therefore, when I push that button in TuneTrack, I'm getting what I paid for by people who were paid for that. When I then take that out and then put that into another machine and that machine generates something different from it, we have a problem.
Mhm.
We have a problem of copyright because I didn't do anything in this, right?
Mhm.
Except push a button.
Sure.
So that to me is where the copyright part of it, and I just wanted to pull it into the frame of the actual creation part too, because our tools and the things we use today will create things for us and will
Mm.
help us to do that, which is incredible if I'm sitting here to just write a song for no money or to do a cue or to do that. But once it starts to, I as a human have to interact with it to turn it into a copyrightable thing as more than just touching a button or taking that thing and then generating another thing, because now I'm starting to take other people's work and other things.
Sure. So is the end result of that, let's talk about text-based generative AI right now. So is the
Hmm.
end result of that copywriting certain keywords, phrase chains, or can't say in the is it one of these things where ultimately, again, I agree with you to an extent. I look at this one case that I brought up and I think to myself, it'd be one thing if this was something this gentleman started doing now in the wake of Sona and all these other programs that literally do just are so new and are so like
Hmm.
vocal, everything, boom, and every month they seem to get better and
Hmm.
better. But he's been doing this for years.
Right.
So I liken it to, here's a guy that figured out he could fly. Now everyone's
Yeah.
going to eventually be able to fly, but this guy goes ahead and flies and he accidentally hits a tree in someone's yard. And everyone's like, well, there's no law against flying. There's no law against flying over someone's yard. And we could have never anticipated, or we weren't thinking you were going to hit the tree, but now we're going to sue you for
Mm.
flying because you did it. And I feel as if I get the premise, and I know that this is how precedent is set in a US court anyway. But
Right.
when I look at I feel as if, again, there have been legitimate sampling cases and legitimate concerns over the years, as
Hmm.
you've pointed out, where they bring in musicologists and they look
I've
at,
been
again,
one.
right, exactly. And that's
Yeah.
why I brought it up. I mean, so,
Yeah.
and you talk about the Marvin Gaye case, and that literally came down to, as you mentioned, it's the essence of the track.
Hmm.
It's still just mathematically an equation that anyone could have come across over time, whether they listened to that Marvin Gaye track or not. And Marvin Gaye didn't take it, he didn't invent it. He got it from somewhere. So my point is, as we move forward, it's going to be incredibly easy for our entire industry to be in the weeds constantly on not only the ethical, but the financial, the spiritual, the moral implications of, did you push a button or did you strum a chord?
Hmm.
And I tend to think that those are self-defeating endeavors, because half the outcome is always going to be disappointing to half the people involved. There's never going to be a clean and easy, oh, we all agree, great, copyright solved, everything's good, let's move on. And I filter that into the, if the music is uninspiring, to go back to something you said earlier, because the human connection is lost a little bit,
Uh-huh.
is there any desire to even go see the recreation of that live anymore? And do we essentially end up losing that too?
And what even is it? I mean, there's a couple things in what you just said, right? I mean, I'll put forward, like, I like The Weeknd's music. I went and saw him live at SoFi Stadium, and it was boring.
Mm.
It was so boring. People now, there were all kinds of positives. I saw an insanely diverse crowd, and I saw people having a great time, but it was to me, it was a rave, you know? And, like,
Mm.
if I wanna go to a rave, I would go to a rave. I love
Right.
dancing, I'll go dance. But if I'm going to a live show, I wanna have a connection with the artist, and I felt no connection with the artist. That's me. That's my experience. And what I would liken it to, and there's, I used to DJ at clubs when DJing at clubs was kind of an hourly gig, right?
Mm.
And then it became a superhero thing where you got paid incredible amounts of money to play other people's music, right? And why I'm going there is what you just said. I mean, this is the thing. There is a curation element to it. If I go in and I push a button 1,000 times and I find the 3 pieces of music that are good, I have used talent
Mhm.
to figure out what 3 ones are good, and I have programmed, written in, right, uh, information that I'm saying get me to here, so there is something to it. Um, but, you know, at the core of this, when you mention copyright, I have as someone who has made a living out of this, I have a very bizarre perspective on copyright. At least I think it's bizarre, which is it is an unnatural system.
Mm.
Meaning nature did not create copyright. That is a human thing to try to generate revenue out of work that we've done.
Mhm.
So we are always battling to control copyright is because there's no natural or obvious or easy way to do it, you know? Um, if copyright and trademark existed in nature, after the first cell split 3 times, the 3rd one would have become an attorney and sued the 2nd one, you
Preach.
know?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So, when we look at any of this, we have to be, I think, careful to the extent of saying, like, I wish we could all work together to create a system where people were paid money for their experience, their emotion, their work, and all of that in these areas. But the system that has been created doesn't work very well. And every time we try to shove something back into it, it just shows yet again another one of its flaws,
Mm.
which is how we've ended up with all of this stuff with AI. And I'm not saying that we can't find solutions out of it or that the old system won't continue to creak along, but I can't ever pretend that, as I started the conversation, that this system is much more than it has been. I mean, we can at best go back a couple hundred years and start talking about it from a publishing perspective. But from a recorded perspective, it's far shorter. So, uh, when I think of the flying analogy, all I think of is like, but what if he was flying into restricted airspace? What if he was,
Sure.
like, I don't know what it is. I'm not
Right.
against this guy, by
No,
the
no,
way.
no. But you do, my point was, well, we just
Yeah,
didn't know. This guy happened
we
to be able
didn't
to do
know.
it before the rest of us could do it.
Right.
And it's like, well, is that bad? I don't everyone seems to
I don't know.
whether he's violated any laws is up to the judge. That's fine. And that's
That's right.
fair. But whether or not it's ethical is this story of when you look at streaming and you look at the ultimate kind of simplification of the way things are consumed,
Mhm.
everything has a live metric now. It's got a like, a button, a
Yep.
subscriber, a monthly listen. And we all know, anybody listening to this podcast, everybody running those companies knows that there is an inherent flaw in that system and that those things can be artificially inflated and regularly are across every platform that has any sort of metric like
Sure.
that, period. And unfortunately, that one particular metric that we talk
Mhm.
about, whatever the platform is, if it's likes on Facebook, views on Instagram, subscribers and views on YouTube, that is the metric used, to your point from earlier, to generate the revenue
Right.
for whoever it is that's made that content. So the profit motive is there to fake that number. And that goes all the way up to the major labels at Spotify, who claim that at any point in time, billions of people are listening to an artist I can't find one human being that even knows about in my hometown. So it's an interesting dichotomy to your point where are we picking on the people that have figured the system out because we want to keep them out, or are we legitimately going to use this as a precedent for change? And my Skeptic Cat always tells me it's the first, it's the prior. There's too much money to be made juking the
Well, people have
stats.
to keep their jobs. I mean,
Yeah,
that's how it always starts, with people keeping their jobs. And we know, we lived through Napster, we lived through torrents, and the idea of people being used as scapegoats, right?
yeah,
Instead of it, look, every single time this has happened, meaning a technological change, instead of embracing it, it has been a fight against it. Had it been embraced, we could have had, I mean, there would have been limitations on bandwidth, but the idea of downloads and streaming, it should have been immediate,
sure.
right? Um, but that's, why didn't Sony invent the iPod? You know,
Exactly.
because they were afraid of people stealing songs.
Yeah.
It's like, well,
How'd that
that's
work?
yeah, how'd that work? Right. So you kind of, and nothing against Sony. I have
No,
a great relationship with those guys, but it's like, that's, everyone is protecting the position that they're in that moment. Um, so I don't, you and I, um, unless you're coloring your beard gray,
mm,
um, you and I,
nice. Well played. Slap. Slap. Nice. Thanks.
mine would have less color than yours if I grow.
Don't try and lessen it. The deed is done. Us old guys, yes.
We aren't going to decide any of this.
That's
Okay.
accurate. Yeah.
What really, the only thing that matters, your son's a bit older than my kids. But I have, my one daughter's 15, one is 12. If they end up liking songs that are AI generated, and liking them in a deep way, right? Not a goofy, funny song, which there are plenty of, um, then that starts to change the game. Then all this stuff we're talking about becomes moot, right? But on the hopeful side, what I think has happened, and there's lots, I mean, when I say think, there's so much data to say that this is true, um, is, but anecdotally, I get in the car a couple weeks ago, I'm picking up my kids plus one of their friends, and my 12-year-old from her playlist puts on the Smiths.
Nice.
Now, look, you can see the posters. They hear lots of but they find their own music and they do their own music,
Yeah.
right? And, they love Olivia Rodrigo I don't know, geez. I mean, so
I was going
many.
to say a bunch of names your old man brain can't comprehend or
My old
remember
man
right
brain
there.
can't.
Right.
Frank Ocean. I mean, lots of stuff that I like, right? That
Sure.
I think is really good music, Doechii and yada yada. Boy, by the way, I just want to flash back to old Tipper Gore fighting against lyrics and
Oh, the
songs and all that.
PMRC.
Like, yeah, holy shit, did they lose that war?
Right?
Uh,
Remember when we thought it was a good idea to send Dee Snider and Frank Zappa to Congress? Remember, like we were like, yeah, they'll fix it.
they're very smart guys.
They are, but it was like still, it's like the dichotomy of what was going on.
Oh,
Again,
no.
just go online, youngins, PMRC, you will love it. You're welcome. Continue.
Yeah. So, when they put on the Smiths, and then like another friend of my daughter's, like we were, so this is, young high school. They were looking at upcoming concerts, and one of this, a 15-year-old girl who said, "Oh my God, Billy Joel's coming. I really want to see him." I was like, what fucking century are we in?
Right.
Right? Like, it's much more how it always used to be in Europe. And I don't, obviously you work for a
Yeah.
European company. Like, I lived in London for a long time, and it'll be like, people just love music,
Yeah.
right?
Oh,
The
yeah.
genre didn't matter, the year didn't matter,
Nope.
and all that. The
Good
haircut
mattered.
mattered.
Good mattered. If it was good music,
Good.
people found it. That's all
That's
that
right.
mattered. Good.
And there has been all this conversation about how new music has been squeezed out by old music, and it's kind of like, that's like saying, new artists squeezed out by older. It's like, no, like, it's just people like what they like. People relate to what they relate to. And if it's the Smiths or, Billy Joel or whatever, like, it all exists in the same time frame now. So that is like, I think, an amazing thing, which also helps the idea of musical movements again, right? You could go out and be influenced by the Smiths and be influenced by, maybe Wire or a few other bands that in that, let's say, I'll say moment, but we're covering over a decade there. Put these together and go out and have a band, and it's as current as it was then
Mm,
because people are listening to music. It also means that anyone can have a hit now. Anything can go viral and be a hit. When that Kate Bush thing happened
Stranger Things.
with Stranger Things, there was no intention behind that at all. It just happened, you know? And it goes back to quality. I mean, and we've talked a lot about AI. We, you know, because I talk so much about technology, we can talk about music too. It's like, I think this is the thing. This is this moment where there is such a love of diverse music. Um, that should give the greatest hope to anyone who is creating or who wants to be in the industry, is I actually think you can dial your way all the way back from chasing the money to just living in the beauty and the art of it. And I think that has a better chance of shining through than it ever did before.
It's interesting to me, this dichotomy of creativity and being an artist and sort of embracing, to use a word we've used already today, your more vulnerable side. Making music is a full contact sport. Doesn't matter how you make it. It requires a lot of you if you take it seriously. And I've often wondered, because as I look at our industry, in my brief but very full life, have noticed, as a community, we generally tend to hate every new thing that happens, every new trend, every new technology. Doesn't matter what it is. The very first knee jerk reaction is, whether it's drum machines in the mid to late 70s, whether, like you said, it's Napster. And again, I don't want to say that these things don't have massive impacts, but we always find our way after the fact. And when I think about other industries, I like to picture,
I do have to point out that I keep a couple drum machines there
you
just
should. Everybody
my
should have a
love of
couple
it.
of drum
Yeah.
machines. I feel it's like, I wonder, no one complained about jet airplanes. Or did all the guys that worked on prop propeller planes and used to make them be like, oh, this is crazy. Jet airplane. What? And I often wonder if in other industries, um, people complain this much about the new thing, only to realize ultimately that even they, if they embrace it, can be made better and more whole, and there's more opportunity for everyone. And as this comes along, I guess I've said all that to try and say, I feel it's an intrinsic responsibility of the music community that is active now to, for lack of a better term, pardon my French, cover your ears, kids, put a fucking sock in it, because all you're doing is making anyone thinking about getting into music, you're making it look like it's this crazy, dire, dark jungle with no hope or future. And why would I ever want, you know, is it something we need to adapt to? Absolutely. Is it something that's not going away? That's the other thing. Grow up. It's not only not going away, it's going to be bigger, stronger, and faster than you are before you can even finish listening to this podcast. So just
And do you think that music has the
the
most?
end game?
Oh
No.
my God,
How do you
Jesus!
think surgeons feel? Now
How do you think truck drivers feel?
exactly. Imagine an AI algorithm that could perfectly perform a quadruple bypass
Mhm.
every single time a human being went under the knife with 0% flaws. You don't think there are people out there in other industries that stand to lose a lot more than us playing a G chord? It's We're the testing ground, right? We're the lowest common denominator. Like I said, everyone loves, they consume video, music. So why
Yep.
not test it here? See what we can learn from the communities, the people, how it interacts. It's like anything else. Do you think Apple, I mean, God bless Steve Jobs. I'm not to throw Apple under the bus, but do you not think music was used as a loss leader to see if everyone on the planet would have one of their phones in their pocket? And I'd say it worked successfully. Go back to 2007 and try and remember what it was like phone wise and music wise before the iPhone came out. Streaming was there, but it wasn't as big of a deal until, oh, here's the first phone where you can have all your music on your phone. And then the world just went, what? All my music on my phone?
But
And here we are.
Well, okay, so I'll reference some people I referenced earlier. You mentioned Apple. My buddy Alex was there. He was there for the start of iTunes, and he was there for 8 years. And then after, a stint on the label side, he was at Amazon. These are places where you music was never going to be their business, right? But music is something that's exciting and sexy. I mean, my shtick on being an artist is a successful artist, everyone either wants to be you or fuck you,
Yep.
right? That's what you're doing. You're standing on stage to represent the uh this outgoing confidence that most people can't do on a daily basis. And you and I both know, I'm sure many people listen to this, there's a lot of artists who, once they walk off stage, just want to disappear. It is a job, it is a performance, it is a thing, right? Um, that brings people into it. But why I want to reference Alex is that, yeah, music can be a loss leader, and it can be a thing to learn more and to develop a market. And there are plenty of companies in the music space who lose money in regions and don't mind losing money because they're going to make it up somewhere else. But back to the idea that, like, Alex loves music, and he was there he was not going to make a decision that would hurt the musician, right? So if you're going out and doing something, I guess I'm just saying it's okay. It's okay to use music in that way, as long as everybody in the frame is getting what they're supposed to. I don't think anyone was draining the value out of music, and there will be people who'd fight me on that. But the issue is that, and actually, my buddy Rodney Orpheus, who you may know, I mean, he Steinberg and
Mhm.
Persona Cell stuff, has the band Cassandra Complex. Um, when all of this was starting, he was like, this is an issue of distribution. And if my means of distribution before was making a record, and a record cost this much, and then I had to get it into people's hands, and now my means of distribution is digital, and it's fractions of a penny. Like, that's where the value went. It's
Mhm.
it's the distribution. And so whether it's Apple, putting a U2 album on an iPod for free, or on an iPhone, um, or this person putting up AI generated music onto a thing, and then there's a battle over that, this, that, the other. The fact is, it costs virtually nothing
Well, and that was
to
always a big
song someone
misconception
out.
about the industry, is
Right.
that the people thought record companies were about music, and they weren't. They were about shiny plastic vehicles that had music on them. If
That's
the
right.
shiny plastic vehicle had anything else on it, whether it was a movie, they did that too. I mean, that's why
That's
you
right.
saw those labels have video distribution and live concert. It's like all
Yeah.
the label's job was to make the thing that the music went on. That's it. The music, the better the music, great, because they'd sell more of the thing, but they
Yeah.
weren't vested in, oh, I wonder if this is really a reflection of the artist's deep. It was, how many of these plastic things can I sell? So to your point, now that you don't need those, environmentally friendly, lightning quick, anyone can do it. It's a win-win for the industry, but we complained about that too, right? It's like,
Yeah.
here's an opportunity for you to finally get your music to everybody in the world. And you know what? I remember, just like you, just like, this sucks. This is horrible. Now, what do you mean I gotta upload? Oh, this is what? Then people are gonna steal it. People were gonna steal your music whether you liked it or not. Whether it was on the radio, they were gonna
Right.
steal your music. This is not new, as you mentioned. It's cyclical. We've been here before.
When you mentioned records earlier, that came into my mind. I remember my grandmother. I was staying at their house, and she came into the room, and I had about 25 records at her house. And she's like, "Why do you have so many records?" And I was like, in my mind, I'm thinking, "My God, I could have thousands of these things."
Yeah.
25 is nothing.
I'm
You
telling
know?
everyone listening right now, I'm not kidding. Try this experiment. Whether you got a thrift shop, whether it's Goodwill, a Savers, garage sale, just pick like one of those every weekend and go look in their record section. You will never find the same records twice. And that should blow your mind on the scope of people that were putting music on round plastic discs back before we had any of these concerns or issues, and trying to do something with it. And I love that, because to me, it's like, wow, there wasn't even a standard. Everyone had different this and different that. And I think
Yeah.
it speaks to the future. So let's take all of these ideas we've talked about and let's synthesize a way forward. What would your vision of a way forward be for everyone right now? Aside from just letting go of the fear. Look, it's here. It's not going away. It's not here to take your job unless you're not really good at your job. Then I got bad news for you. Technology, like you alluded to, will always take your job if you're not good at it. If you are replaceable, you will be replaced.
That's right. So I think where I go is really esoteric.
I love it.
And I'm not alone in this, but I look at myself first. I live in a world where I project. I project my future, and on any given moment, I project it as fear or glory. I project when I'm talking to you. What is it that Rick will want to hear me say? And what will the people who are listening to this want to hear? I'm always, you know, so it's kind of like when I live in a space of judgment, and actually I can dial this back to a very clear music experience for me. When I first started doing music for picture, as I said, I didn't really know what I was doing. And so I would get a lead from a friend, and I would make something and I'd get rejected. I'd make something, I'd get rejected. And man, if there's anything that anyone in music knows, it's rejection, right? And I was getting so just, upset, because this is how I paid my rent,
Right.
and I was doing something that couldn't pay my rent. And I sat there one day after getting rejected again and said, "Oh my God, every time someone asks me for something, I'm giving them what I think they want from me, and they're rejecting me. So I'm not just getting rejected, I'm getting rejected at being someone. I'm failing at being someone else.
Mm.
I'm not failing at being me." And it switched everything, and I started just making what I felt was right, instead of what I thought someone else would feel was right. So where I go to this is, if someone is making music right now at whatever age they are and whatever they're doing, it is just letting go of that expectation of doing it for anyone other than you.
Mm.
And I feel like, yeah, is it good? Is it bad? Is someone gonna buy it, not buy it? Will it go viral and all this? Like, you just can't think about this stuff. The best writers in the world, and I've m worked with and known some of them, uh, like, man, they aren't trying to do anything.
Mm.
They are just doing it, and what an incredible space to be in. I, uh I so here's one. Okay, I'll give some vulnerability, with a touch of, uh, bragging. I recorded Frusciante,
Mhm.
a few times, and the first time I did it, he was playing acoustic guitar, and I actually have a picture while it's happening, because I took this picture of him that's still one of my favorites. Sadly, digital wasn't that great then, but, uh, I started crying.
Mm.
I was crying to listening. I'm recording him crying, listening to him play acoustic guitar, you know,
Yeah.
because what was coming out of him was so emotionally raw, you know? And I know for a fact he wasn't sitting there thinking about what my reaction would be,
Right.
you know? All he was doing what he did,
Mm.
you know?
I am 350,000% in that same headspace. For me, the inevitable takeover of our robot overlords just makes the dude with the bald head and the long beard screaming heavy metal songs about ninjas and robots even more unique. It doesn't matter that there's a market out there that consumes this new product. whatever it was going to be, whether even if it wasn't AI generated, even if things stayed the way they did in the 80s, 90s, 60s, it doesn't, like you said, you pick a time period, things change. People's life experience changes. The context of how people experience music in their life changes. And as we evolve as a society and a species, of course it's going to change. So as we kind of land the plane on all of this, it's like to bring it back to what you said, we are spoiled. We forget that this thing we love has only really been organized from a industry air quote standpoint for 100 years. I mean, and in the big scope of things, it's like that's nothing. And its heyday, I think everybody can admit, we're never going back to the 70s, 80s, or 90s. It's never going to happen. Now, that music will stand the test of, that's not to say that there's no value. I'm just saying the industry itself, and most people don't even realize in the early 80s, the industry almost imploded on itself. Most people think the 80s was nothing but money and success. It's like, no, if Thriller didn't come out, the music industry would have changed much earlier than it did in the 90s. So this fear of the new is understandable. I get it. And I really do, because it's like, oh, but I also feel as if we all want to help one another as a music community, there's three things we can do in the short term that ultimately will change the game. Number one, before you develop an opinion, get all the information. Try it out. Don't be ashamed to go, do some of this AI stuff, or don't dismiss it because, like you said, there are a lot of jokes and parodies, and that's cool.
Mhm.
But go check it out. See what you really think. Listen to it critically.
Mhm.
Number two, realize that just because anybody can do something now that you think they shouldn't be able to do doesn't make you less valuable. Like you
Mhm.
had just mentioned, anything that makes you more valuable, because more and more people are just going to be pushing a button eventually, and less people are going to be picking up an instrument or putting the
Mhm.
turntables down. That's value. And number three, you got to breathe and remember why you do this. You had mentioned earlier that when you were a kid, it's like all you wanted to do was music. I
Mhm.
don't think if I would go back and talk to 11-year-old Gregory, he'd be like, one day I'm going to work for all these different companies. And dude, you'd be like, no, I want to be a rock star. I want to be fucking Gene Simmons. I want to breathe fire and spit blood. And maybe not you. That's me.
You
But I'm
just
just,
transferred your dream
yeah, I
onto
did.
me.
I totally projected. And what's funny is it's not
Uh,
even my 11-year-old dream. That was me in the mirror this morning. You're getting closer. One
I
day
know, I know. I was
he's
gonna say.
retired. Someone's got to be the new
Yeah,
demon.
it's
It's
like,
like, yeah,
will
I
they
can wear a
hire
wig just like
him on
anyone else,
stage?
man. They'd buy me as the new Gene. But no. So my point is, and then the road comes in and you take the opportunities, experience the life that you're given. The universe kind of unfolds. And I love this manifestation thing where it's like, look, if all you're doing is you're in the dark and you're like, oh man, this sucks. It's never going to be that. It's like, well, okay, then you're right. You're absolutely right. It does.
But
Or if
that
you're positive about it, guess what? You're right too. This is great. Nothing but opportunity. You're right in either way.
right, and I think as when a person's doing this and they're younger, you know, I look, I couldn't learn it. I still had those fears. I still self-sabotaged over and over again in the early parts of my career, but I look at things now, and I can see every win that I had just came into my life. You know? Now, did it come from, was I putting in effort? Absolutely. I was, could I have put in more effort? Absolutely. But, one of the things that we have of many things in common, but maybe it's, a rarer thing, is doing music with our spouses,
Yes. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And there have been so many incredible things career-wise that came out of me doing stuff, music with my wife. The first thing we did together was a cover of Time After Time
Mm.
for a film that hadn't been released yet, which was Napoleon Dynamite. And we ended up being on the iTunes charts for 3 months, right? And this is when we were dating, we weren't married, like, we literally created a band to do a song for a soundtrack, right? And ended up doing music, and we have done music off and on for years and got to have a lot of things. And when I think about the music I've done, and I'm gonna guess you're in a very similar space to me, is like, when I listen to any music that my wife and I did together, I definitely am not thinking about economics,
No. No,
you know?
never. I'm always amazed when I get emails from people that listen to my music. I'm still I'm still overwhelmed that other human beings listen to something I create
Mhm,
and then tell me, "Man, I love this." I do that. It's like, I don't how did I do that? I don't
mhm,
and if I was dependent on Sony or RCA still to have made that experience possible for me, it never would have happened.
right,
Just never would have happened. At least not the way
right,
that it has for me personally. So
right.
I'm with you. So here's what I'd like to do. So we've made all these observations and prognostications. I think we should get back together in a year and we should do a follow-up and see
That would
if
be fun.
I think if any of the because by then we should at least have some more traction on this court case I'm talking about because I do think whatever the federal courts rule with regard to what you had mentioned about copyright really needing to be tied to a human person and their work.
Mm,
That's implied, but no one's come out and said, yeah, that's how it is yet.
yeah,
Um, and I think ultimately Spotify is in a very, very volatile position right now because there's a lot going on there. The industry's changing, things are changing. And I think in a year, it'd just be look, the AI mania, it's like the satanic panic, only much more condensed. It's like, okay.
mhm.
And I think AI, for everyone else listening, I think it's going to get bored of music and movies real quick too. I think it's going to be like, okay, small potatoes, great. We can write words, we can write contracts.
It
Let's
is.
go. Let's go, like you said, drive cars, or worse, and more scary than music, fly planes, or have the nuclear codes, or
I
manage your water distribution, or it's like, oh, all the
dude,
things AI.
I feel bad for anyone who's listening to this who is early in their career in accounting.
Ooh, yeah,
You know what I mean? Like, that's the thing. We're gonna go through lots of changes as a society, and I actually think okay, so I'm gonna number 1, yes, I would love to speak again about it. I'll even send you some updates. I have friends that I do that for as we see weird shit happening. But, um oh my gosh, what was then there was something else I was gonna say about that, but, I don't know.
it's
Now
all
I
right.
lost it. That's
Great. I
bullshit.
love it. That's awesome.
Um,
That shows you're older than I am mentally. So I've just
I
been with
am
it the whole
older.
time.
Well, it is earlier in my day.
Oh, wah,
Wah,
wah.
wah, wah.
West Coast whining bullshit.
Yeah,
It is earlier though. You are a mensch for being here this early in the morning.
I
I'm
get up
not
at
gonna
5,
complain.
dude. I get up at 5. I
I don't
have
want
to.
to. Yeah.
I had it's like you gotta clear the head, get ready for your day. But no, it's gonna be something about, writing music or some shit. Look, I think that, we are gonna see, and I do think music is kinda gonna be forgotten about. Film is a way bigger threat because if you see some of the stuff that's being done, in terms of, the films always had the film industry always had the protection of you can't make a $150 million film. And it's like, I think you you're
Yeah.
getting there.
Japan this year said, "I'll hold my beer. I'll take that bet." And then
Yeah.
Godzilla minus one came out for like like what we spend on a
Right,
Seinfeld episode. Like, let's just make one of the
right.
most epically beautiful films of the year.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
But we'll
Well,
see.
listen, here's the thing. You need to know that we love and appreciate you, and we're grateful that you were able to take time for us today. We really, I mean, I could go on with you for hours and hours and hours, but you know that someone's hiding in the bathroom listening to this at work, and we've already gotten them in trouble. We don't want to cost them their job. So
That's
we'll come
fair.
back and do a part two. But man, I'm going to turn and talk to these people and say goodbye, but then I'll come back and we'll finish up on our own. But just thank you on behalf of all of us participating and
No,
listening. We
thank
love
you.
you and just thank you. So hold on one second. All right, folks. There you heard the very angry, very subversive rumblings of two old men screaming at clouds in their front yard. No, the end result here, just to put a pretty bow on it, is both Gregory and I are pretty optimistic about AI and its impact and influence on what we do, music. And we would like to encourage you to be optimistic as well. Man, if you love music, just take this as another part of the industry that's coming along, that's new, it's exciting. Check it out, look into it, develop your own opinions, and then realize that it changes nothing about you loving music and you wanting to make and participate in music. And if you want to use it, use it. If you don't, don't. But be nice to everyone else in between. That would be my takeaway for you today. Don't get bogged down in the weeds. Be the lawnmower. So listen. Thank you for your time, your energy, your attention. Again, this has been the Sound Horizons podcast brought to you by TuneTrack. We'll be back next week with another amazing guest, another wonderful human person from the music industry that we know and love for you to listen to me talk to. But until then, stay safe, be good to one another, and I look forward to you listening to and seeing me and my old gray beard on the next episode of the Sound Horizons podcast. Have a great day, everyone. Bye.